Today's video will be a little different to the type of content I usually post, in as much as this video will be more serious. I'll try and throw a few jokes in, but it's likely to be very dark gallows humour, because over the last few days, people from overseas have messaged me asking what happened last week in Leeds that led to the riots that made international news. And of course, it wasn't just Leeds, it was also Whitechapel down in London. So first up, I want to state everything I say is my own opinion. I'm not stating anything as fact. Secondly, and this is important, I'm aware I'm a middle-aged white guy with a shaved head and tattoos, so some people may see me and guess, based on nothing more than my appearance, I'm one of those dickheads, which I'm not. But what I'll be discussing today is about culture, not race. I cannot make that clear enough. However, I'm an Englishman. Over 80% of the English population are white. Therefore, it's fair to assume that the majority of Englishmen are the same colour as me. However, that doesn't mean that someone with a different skin colour is any less English than I am. In the same way that the Shinto religion is practiced almost exclusively in Japan. Therefore, it's safe to assume that most Shintoists will be Japanese. However, you don't have to be Japanese to follow the Shinto religion. I hope that makes sense. So today I'm talking about cultures. Now, in the Western world, in Europe and the Americas, for the most part, our society is built on Christian values. That doesn't mean that we're Christians. It means that's where we get our moral compass from. And for decades, the Western world has invited in people from other cultures, and for the most part, that works absolutely fine. But sometimes people arrive in the West who, at best, their cultures don't align with ours, and at worst, they move to another country and then openly hate the host nation, often whilst taking a disproportionate amount of the available welfare system. It's a polite way of saying that some people move to the West to fuck over the benefit system. Last week, social services were called to a house in the Hare Hills area of Leeds. The house was occupied by a Roma family, and it's not clear if they were Romanian or Roma gypsies. Either way, Romanians and Roma, they live a slightly different lifestyle to the rest of us in Europe. One of the 5 children, remember what I said about benefits, one of the 5 children had been hospitalised, and social services turned up to remove the children for their own protection. As we see here, the kids are being removed. It looks very distressing. They also look somewhat feral, in my opinion. So the police had to assist, and that's when it all kicked off. Now, it's worth mentioning that in Hare Hills, only around 3 to 3.5% of the population are Roma. It's also worth saying that, rightly or wrongly, many of the indigenous people, of Leeds aren't overly keen on the Roma community, as this young lady will now explain.
If you are coming here, right, we're opening our arms. We're giving you everything you want. We can't get a lease. We cannot get a lease. But we have the biggest drug empire going on the Herald's Road. Arabics, Romanians, Turkish, the British don't run nothing around here.
That woman's opinion is not uncommon here in the UK. The idea that it's hard for some people to get onto the property ladder or access basic services such as dentistry and healthcare because of an influx of migration, both legal and illegal. And the perception that there are people who come to the UK and are just given everything, that is very common, and it's not without grounds. Now, it isn't necessarily the fault of the people coming here, but I can understand where that anger comes from, and it's why the small boats crisis is such a huge news story here in the UK. At present, the British government pays £8 million a day on luxury accommodation to keep false asylum seekers in luxury hotels. And I say false asylum seekers because my understanding of the asylum system is you leave your own country and stop and claim asylum at the first safe country. Yet here in the UK, we have thousands of people who've come from the Middle East and Africa all the way across Europe to get to the UK, to access, to be blunt, our fucking benefit system. Now, unless there's a war going on in France or Ireland, there's no reason for someone not to claim asylum there. And of course, the places in France and Ireland where it is unsafe is mostly down to fake asylum seekers. Also, over 80% of people arriving in the UK illegally, and I will get back to Leeds in a moment, are men of military service age. Now, I've never heard of a conflict where the elderly, the women and the children are left behind to fight whilst all the young men fuck off and run away. I digress. With tensions building between the tiny Roma community, who make up 3 to 3.5% of the local community, and the police, another group of people, who make up around 35% of the local population, decided to weigh in. The followers of the religion of peace once again demonstrated just how peaceful they are by unleashing unprovoked violence towards the constabulary. It's hardly surprising given that this is their MP.
We will not be silent. We will raise the voice of Gaza. We will raise the voice of Palestine. Allahu Akbar.
That is Mothin Ali, an MP for the Green Party who got elected in a local election by campaigning about Gaza. A local election. I'm not great on geography, but I'm fairly certain that Gaza isn't part of Yorkshire. And Islamists, not Islam but Islamists, they have infiltrated the Green Party, and it's not for the first time that Islamism has infiltrated political lefties. Back in the 1970s, during the Islamic Revolution in Iran, Islamists teamed up with Iranian communists, and once the Ayatollah was in command, the Islamists then executed all of the communists. But of course, that was back in the 1970s. It's now the 21st century, and the Green Party are all about environmentalism. Things like renewable energy, wind and solar, reducing our carbon footprint, and of course, the eradication of Israel. By now, the Roma community and followers of the religion of peace had overturned a police patrol car and were throwing bricks at the local constabulary. So the police bravely ran away. This allowed the agitators to dig up parts of the road, to use later in the day as missiles to hurl once again at the police, and to set fire to a £100,000 bus.
Oh my God! No way! No way! No way!
I mentioned followers of the religion of peace throwing things at the police. Of course, I only mean the men, because the women aren't allowed outside. The police then returned briefly before running away again, but not before they'd arrested a white British woman, who was complaining that only white British people ever seem to get arrested. Apparently she was arrested and put into jail for her own safety. That says a lot, that the jails are safer than the streets. But why did the police nick her rather than the obvious rioters? Well, the British police have form on this. You see, in the UK, the police are often accused of two-tier policing, and in my opinion, that is 100% true. Because if it had been Leeds United football fans causing 1/10 of the disruption, or women and children waving England flags, the police would have been there in a heartbeat with horses and riot shields. Yet because it's Roma families and Muslims, they run away lest they're accused of cultural insensitivity. And maybe I'm being ignorant. Maybe there's a verse in the Quran which states that when the pikey kids are taken away, it's the duty of everyone to los paving slabs at the old bill. Two-tier policing is nothing new. Back in the late 1990s, a scandal began to emerge, which went back to the early 1980s and continues to this day. Rotherham is not that far from Leeds, and the Rotherham abuse scandal was and still is huge. It transpired that taxi drivers, most of which were of Pakistani and Bangladeshi origin, again, this is culture, not race, had been grooming, drugging and raping mostly young white girls, who in some cultures would be seen as worthless. And it transpired that the police had known about this for over a decade, but had been advised not to make any arrests, lest it was seen as being racist. Now, I'm being deliberately vague here, but there was a Labour councillor who is now a Labour Member of Parliament who said at the time, those girls need to shut up for the sake of diversity. So for any women and girls watching, in the UK, a member of our government says that if you get violated by someone who's a different colour to you, it's more important that the UK looks like a fucking Netflix show than justice actually being served. Like I said, that case came to light in the 1990s and prosecutions are still ongoing to this very day. So on to Whitechapel, down in London. Whitechapel is most famous for being the hunting ground for the serial killer Jack the Ripper. It used to be a predominantly Jewish area, although these days you won't find a Jew anywhere in Whitechapel. Most of the population are Bangladeshi or of Bangladeshi origin, and on the same day that the riots broke out in Leeds, riots broke out in Whitechapel because Bangladeshi students had been shot by the police. That's shocking stuff. That's an outrage, apart from one caveat. The Bangladeshi students were shot by police in Bangladesh, 5,000 miles away. Nothing to do with Whitechapel or London or the UK. Why do people feel entitled to destroy this country? Here is my very, very crude guess. In the decades following the Second World War, many Western countries, Britain included, needed to import many, many people, often to replace those who'd been killed during the war. And Britain imported from its then crumbling empire. And for the vast majority of these people, they came to Britain to work, to build a better life. And many of them were treated fucking terribly by the indigenous Brits. But as time has gone on, those people and their families, they've become part of the wonderful melting pot that is British society. Yet there were some who didn't. They lived in third world medieval shitholes, and they came to Britain with the sole intention of turning their new home into a third world medieval shithole. Their cultures didn't align with the British, so they stayed separate. They had their own laws, which they saw as superior to British law, so they don't obey British laws. Many of them, to this day, haven't learned how to speak English because they don't integrate with the rest of the population. And they don't even need the rest of the population to procreate. Most of them are married to their own cousins. And of course, inbreeding, that leads to massive stresses on the National Health Service. And I can say that because I'm from Norfolk. So what we have now are generations of people living in ghettoised communities, isolated communities within the UK, who've been raised to think that although they live in this country, they're not part of this country. And this is backed up by migration, both legal and illegal, and by attitudes like the young woman we saw from Leeds, this idea that foreigners come to this country and just take. Now, if we then stir in things like the 9/11 terror attack, the 7/7 terror attack, and the Manchester Arena bombings, that stirs up mistrust between different communities. And then last year, on October the 7th, Hamas attacked Israel. Now, I'm not going to get into the complexities of Israel in Palestine, not a fucking chance. But what happened there was a known terrorist group murdered 1,500 people, most of whom were civilians. When Israel counterattacked, Hamas played the victim. And this time it worked. Now, in my opinion, the war between Israel and Hamas isn't really a war between Israel and Hamas. It's a proxy war between Israel and Iran. And Iran is run by a death cult seeking to bring about the end of the world through a nuclear war. Now, I have sympathy for the people of Palestine. I'm not well versed enough to give a proper opinion on that part of the world. However, I will say this. Before the October the 7th attacks, where were all the Free Palestine flags? Where was every university campus screaming that Israel is a terrorist state? It didn't happen because until the Israelis got attacked, no one gave a flying fuck about Palestine. And what we're seeing now is a shift among militant Muslims. Of course, not all Muslims, the bad minority. In the UK, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of mosques. But here, and not just here, in Europe and in Australia, and I believe parts of America, militant Muslims aren't praying in their mosques anymore. They're doing it on the streets. They're deliberately holding up traffic. Make no mistake, This isn't about religion, this is a show of force. So I started this video an age ago, looking for the reasons behind these riots. And first up, I'll say a lot of the fault comes from the Western world. If you went to Saudi Arabia and asked to build a church, they'd chop your fucking head off. But here in the West, we are so fucking tolerant. We are so accepting. We feel so guilty about everything that we'll let people come from other cultures and just fuck ours over. I think we've reached a tipping point. In these riots, we've seen people who either believe they are above the law or know they are above the law. They will not get prosecuted because there's so much cultural sensitivity. But oddly, if you read the more left-leaning papers, they state the reasons for these riots was actually the far right. Now, I said this video is not about race, and it isn't, but I will raise this point. If you are looking for white supremacists, generally speaking, they won't be brown. Admittedly, both the far right and militant Muslims, they both hate the Jews. Yet, if we imagine a young man, say of Bangladeshi origin, attending a far-right rally, where all the other attendees are white men with shaved heads waving swastika flags, and he decides to chant up, "Go back to where you fucking come from," that's going to be a bit of an own goal. Now, that's the end of this video, and somehow I've got to try and finish this on a light note. If you enjoyed it, please do like and subscribe if you haven't already, and as ever, thanks for watching. This video is likely to be a little different to those which I usually post. This one might make sense. So I want to be clear, I'm talking about cultures and not races. For example, I'm a white guy, the vast majority of the British population are white, therefore it's fucked it up. Of the conflict that's gone on for many decades between Israel and Palestine, nor am I getting involved in it, lest I want to go out with a bang. Two-tier policing. Of course, our police are usually busy taking the knee and dancing at pride parades. I began this video trying to answer the question, fuck that up. Thus it is that we can assume, fuck off, wasp. Before I go, one final thing. If you watch my videos and you find them amusing, if I bring any relief or levity to your day, can I ask a favour? My band Athena's Revenge have reached the last 10 to play the Rockstock Festival here in the UK, which is a massive deal. So please, if you have a moment, Google Rockstock UK Vote, scroll down to Athena's Revenge, where you'll note the guitarist is a rather handsome looking chap. Scroll down again to vote for us, and then all you need to do is enter your name, your email and your phone, and that enters you into a prize draw. If we get to play that festival, I promise I'll record the best fucking video ever. Thanks for watching.